Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And this is a video I've been talking about doing for a while. I keep pushing it off because there's always another video, there's always another topic, discussion, review, format, whatever it is. But this is why Kickstarters are the best addiction. And I don't take that lightly. Addiction is a complicated conversation to begin with. To be very clear, this is not a clinical conversation. This is just my own reasoning why I love Kickstarter, the Kickstarter journey, and why I genuinely believe there is a form of addiction around it, and yet, if done well, I think it can be a less damaging, very rewarding addiction. Perhaps not damaging at all. In fact, the definitions of addiction, it depends which way you go. If you start with the basic definition, when you plug it into Google or whatever, you're going to have the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. Pure and simple. Addicted. You are addicted to the thing. Now, unfortunately, that definition includes the word addicted, which makes it a bit harder to actually extrapolate from there, which is why if you dig further down into a definition of it, you'll find addiction is the inability to stop using a substance or engaging in a behavior, even though it is causing psychological and physical harm. The term addiction does not only refer to dependence on substances such as heroin, cocaine, whatever, meaning it actually goes a step deeper. It's not purely about the inability to not do the thing, but rather it's about the damage of the thing, the inability to stop engaging in a behavior when it is damaging. That is the key part of this video. The inability to stop engaging in a behavior even when it's damaging. You see, there's three types of general damage that addiction will cause. Lots more, especially once you extrapolate downwards, but there's three types of general damage. There's going to be the monetary impact of any addiction, there's going to be the relationship impact of any addiction, and there's going to be the dereliction of other essential functions. Whatever those functions might be your job, it might be the relationships in your life, it might be any other thing that isn't getting done because you're too much engaged in that addiction. And addiction, the steps towards addiction there's generally four accepted steps as far as the pathway towards addiction, starting from experimentation. And by the way, again, this video is titled Why Kickstarter is the Best Addiction. This might sound very familiar. There's going to be experimentation. You see a Kickstarter, maybe you back it, seems interesting, you don't really know what's going on. There's going to be regular use. You're on Kickstarter, you have the app, maybe GameFound as well, who knows, where fair use or whatever it is, but there's going to be general use. Regular use of said substance, activity, whatever it is. There's risky use and abuse. That's the moment you first see a $500 pledge manager and you stop thinking, dear Lord, I will never do that. You thank yourself that it's not $1,000 and you go ahead and back. So that's going to be the risky use and abuse. And then lastly, there's the addiction and dependency of said thing, substance, activity, whatever it is. No comment on how that factors into Kickstarter and my choices there. But I think the parts I want to focus on are what I get out of the Kickstarter journey personally, and how I don't think it's damaging, at least if done right, which is why I enjoy it so much. Kickstarter absolutely has those dopamine high moments of another stretch goal, another thing released, a big box of plastic headed your way. It's a thing that constantly triggers those little dopamine hits of more reward, more reward, more reward for the activity you're engaging in. Let's start by talking about the damage, or perhaps the lack thereof if handled correctly. Because again, there's three general categories. There's monetary, relationships, and the dereliction of other activities, duties, etc. in your life. As far as monetary, that's going to be why I tackle the entire channel the way I do. When I talk about should you back it, or to back or not to back videos every Monday, when I talk about the aspect of Kickstarter, the financial aspect of does it make sense to back this thing? And sometimes I'm hemming and hawing over a $10 difference. If you get it now, it'll be $10 more. If you get it at retail, it'll be $10 less. And that might seem like a big deal. Like, I'm just nitpicking over $10 differences. And to be fair, if I really want a game, I suck it up and I pay the extra $10 and I get it because I'll let the FOMO win for today. But most of the time I don't. Because for me, I do treat Kickstarter a bit like an addiction. I do look at every single campaign. I do back far more than I should. And I do spend a decent amount of money on Kickstarter. And so we have to determine what the financial damage is. What's the monetary damage? And there's two ways to tackle that. The first is going to be the way I choose to tackle it for the most part, which is I choose to take a very does it make sense financially to back this? I want to spend a lot of money on Kickstarter, and so how can I do so in a way that is fiscally responsible? I'll turn around and sell something down the road. Maybe I'll lose $5 in some Kickstarters. Maybe on the next Come On Kickstarter, I'll make $150. but there'll be a range of my winning or losing, so to speak, on what I buy and what I sell it for if or when it's not for me. If a game is for me, it's a different conversation. But if it's not for me, as many inevitably won't be. Many, they might not pass the first, I get the game, I play it, I move on from it. Some of them I keep for potentially years and I get rid of them. And some of them I've had, for a long time, and I don't plan on getting rid of them anytime soon. And so there's going to be that aspect of trying to ensure that I can get as much money back as possible in order to mitigate or minimize the amount of financial loss that this addiction is causing me. The second way you can deal with it, and this one does involve a certain amount of self-justification, although to be fair, this entire video is self-justification, so that's said with no judgment, is going to be if you have enough disposable income, and you could back whatever Kickstarters you want without it causing you financial harm, then that may not be a problem. Because the monetary impact of any addiction and the problems associated with it are not having less money. Money is only a medium, it's only a tool that is used to buy other things. Spending money is not a problem. Spending money that you need for other things is a problem. So if you have the disposable income to be able to make the financial choices to spend whatever it is you want, I don't care if it's $10,000 a month on Kickstarter, if you can do so without causing yourself financial harm, then it's not a problem at all. That's going to be the financial aspect of it. And so for me, again, to me personally, I handle Kickstarter as a monetary decision as to get it now, get it later, can I sell it, can I get my money back? Those are all factors in what I'm doing with Kickstarter to minimize or to remove completely the monetary harm. Relationships are a trickier one. Relationships are absolutely a trickier one. It's going to depend relationship by relationship. Your relationship is going to be different than mine. Mine's going to be different than someone else's. The amount of money you spend on Kickstarter, whether or not you can afford it, and whether or not it's about money, it might not be about money. It might just be about the time you spend on Kickstarter, the time you spend on board games. There are certainly going to be potential downsides in any relationship you have. Relationships do not have to be the significant other. It could be parents, siblings, friends. It could be anything. There absolutely can be harm to relationships through your use of being overly involved in a game. And it might be as simple as your game group. It might be as simple as your game group being frustrated with you, the fact that you're always bringing something new to the table and you never play the games you love. And so that's a balance you'll have to find. It's a balance that isn't necessarily easy, but it's a balance you do have to find as far as ensuring that your decisions on Kickstarter, or any addiction, but we're talking about Kickstarter today, whether your decisions on Kickstarter are in any way causing negative harm to those around you in any way, shape, or form. Your significant other, your kids, your friends, your game group, whatever it is that is in your life. And I don't have an easy one-shot answer, or even like, oh, there's two options for this. It's varied. The big question there is, do you find people in your life are frustrated with what you're doing? And if so, how can you adjust or change it or something to your behavior in a way that it is less of a problem, or ideally not a problem at all? If it's your significant other frustrated with the money you're spending, if it's your game group frustrated with the games that are not on the table, it might be a significant other frustrated that you won't play their favorite games because you're constantly bringing something new to the table. If people are frustrated, find out what those frustrations are and try to adjust or curb them so that they're not as frustrated by you being on Kickstarter as much as you are, or for me, as much as I am. That's going to be the relationships one. No simple answers there. It's going to be case by case, unfortunately. And lastly is the dereliction of other essential activities, responsibilities, and all of that. And to that end, again, it's going to be case by case. But what are you potentially neglecting? And there certainly can be a certain amount of damage there. To begin with, if you're neglecting your job, you might get fired. That might be a bad thing, unless, of course, you can afford it, in which case we're back to monetary. You might be neglecting parenting, or just date night. And this is more of a conversation around board games in general. It's not necessarily just Kickstarter. But in general, any form of dereliction of essential responsibilities that you are engaging in because you are getting too many Kickstarter games, you're on Kickstarter too much, you're working extra side jobs to pay for the Kickstarters you're getting, whatever it is, again, that's going to be a case-by-case thing. Now, for myself, this entire conversation is around the bias of why I consider Kickstarter the best addiction. And for the most part, with those biases in mind, again, the monetary aspect, I spend money on games that I love, but for the most part, especially when you factor in getting Kickstarters that are limited availability, that you can sell for more than you paid for when you got them initially, I'm mostly up on Kickstarter. I have to double check, it's been a while since I did the full math, but I used to track this diligently and I was up. I was backing Kickstarters and I was still up in terms of the amount of money I was getting. I don't treat it like an investment. There are much easier or better ways to make money. But as far as not losing money, I managed to get it to that point at least. And something I want to keep tracking in that sense, but yeah, I'm not worried about that part. As far as the relationships part, I am blessed. I mean, again, it's not just spouses, but I am fortunate to have an incredibly amazing spouse who not only engages in the hobby with me, but is, even though like I'm here in the hobby and she's here, she's more than tolerant to the fact that I'm over there. It does help that I have a YouTube channel, but she was that way before I had a YouTube channel, so I can't say it's like, oh, it's because of the channel. It's not. She's always been that way. And as far as dereliction of other essential activities, that might be the biggest one. And I would argue even a step back, even as far as relationships. I certainly have had potential problems with relationships that I have two kinds of friends. I have friends that play board games with me and friends that don't. And the friends that don't play board games with me might show up while I'm in the middle of board games with my other friends. And that can result in a degree of frustration. And it's all about managing that, because different relationships, different things to factor in, but there is a degree of impact on my life that isn't 100% positive. It's about trying to mitigate it or manage it to be as ideal as possible. So that's kind of a long conversational piece about all the potential harms of Kickstarter, but we haven't talked about why I enjoy it. We've just talked about why it's not as damaging. But I think why it's not as damaging is a key part of this conversation. There are so many possible things you could be addicted to in this world with different degrees of harm. There's drugs, there's alcohol, there's food, there's movies, there's books, there's any form. Again, addiction is one of two things. It's just the process of being addicted to something, and then a step later, it's the damage that thing can have. So it's a question of which definition you're using, but there's a lot of things to be obsessed with in this world. And for me, I love the Kickstarter journey. I talked about this already, but the dopamine hits that are there 24/7. Another stretch goal unlocked, another daily reveal. You get on a Kickstarter, you find the Kickstarters, you're going to go ahead and start researching the Kickstarters, you'll back the Kickstarters, there'll be updates, there'll be stretch goals, there's daily unlocks, there's reveals. Then you wait and you get the occasional update as time goes on, you're getting this update from that campaign, this update from that campaign, this one's a good update, that one's kind of a boring one, this Kickstarter's delayed, that one's arriving, this one they threw something extra in the package. Meanwhile, you're backing new Kickstarters. At the same time, games start showing up at your house. The fun part of the Kickstarter journey is once you're a year in, you basically have this cycle of packages that keep coming, assuming you kept on doing it. If you kept on backing a game or two every single month, you're going to have packages coming every single month that are little presents from a year ago that you bought and are showing up at your doorstep. You get those games, you unbox the game, you dig into the components, the miniatures, you start reading the rules, you're excited, you finally get it to the table with your game group, and then you start playing the game. And that's where the pathways diverge. All those highs I just talked about, all that fun, every single aspect of that is a dopamine hit. Every single update, every single stretch goal, every single thing, when you unbox it, when you have 6 boxes on your table and you start pulling out the miniatures, looking at each one, admiring it, the sun drop, the shading, the detail on that, every single thing, the coins, these metal coins I'm playing with from Rurik that just showed up, every single thing is a dopamine hit. It's exciting. It's fun. Hopefully it's not damaging, but it's exciting and fun. And then once you're done playing with it, that's where the pathways diverge. You have, like, the games that I chose to put on the couch over here. The games on the couch next to me are absolutely amazing games. Some of these games you play, I just played Nemesis for the first time last night. People have been telling me to play this again and again and again. I just played it for the first time, and oh my freaking gosh, it's amazing. Nemesis is such a fun experience. It's incredible. We'll save that for another time. We'll get into it. I need to play it more. I'll have a review at some point, but Nemesis is incredible. Brass, I haven't played Birmingham, I've played Lancashire, but Brass is an incredible game. Spirit Island, Rise of Moloch, which I don't think you can see because it might be out of the camera, but there are so many incredible games out there that you'll play, you'll enjoy, and it'll be like, wow, I get to add this game to my collection. I backed it on Kickstarter. I knew that I was excited about it for a reason, and it 100% paid off, which is great. And then there's the games that you'll move on from. There's the games you'll play, and whether it's not for you at all, whether it takes a few more plays, you'll move on from them. But that's okay, because depending on what you're doing with it, again, in my case, I'm treating it as a monetary cycle. The games that aren't for me get sent back into the system, get sold to somebody else to keep funding the next one. I love Kickstarter as a journey. I love Kickstarter as an addiction, because it's more than just playing games. We're all busy. We all have other things going on in our lives, and we play our games when we can, and then we have busy days and tiring days and exhausting days. And sometimes a week goes by, depending on who you are, maybe a month goes by, and you realize you haven't been playing a lot. And sometimes it can feel like you're a little bit not in the hobby. Kickstarter gives you this weird cycle where you can constantly be in the hobby. You don't have to be playing games to be in love with this hobby, to be in love with the space, to be benefiting from what goes on. Whether it's watching video reviews about the space, speaking of which, thank you for watching this video. Whether you're watching videos about board games, whether you're backing board games, whether you're reading a rule book in preparation for when your game group finally gets together and you can play it. There are so many peripheral ways to be involved in the hobby, and Kickstarter gives you such a degree of peripheral obsession with this hobby that I enjoy. And then you get the game, and it might not be for you. And that's fine. Maybe you don't even play it. Maybe you get the game and you realize there's a few games that are on my shelf that I haven't gotten played, and I'm wondering whether there's a lot more than a few games I haven't gotten played, but there's a few Kickstarters that I was really excited for. Ultra Quest is a great example of a Kickstarter I was really excited for, and I set it up and I learned the rules and it didn't hit the table, and now other games are kind of in my front and center vision, and Ultra Quest is sitting on the shelf over there just waiting for my attention. I may decide to get rid of it without playing it. I may decide to sell it off without ever actually playing the game, which would, to one extent, be a shame. But even if that happens, I'll have backed the game. I'll have followed every single update and stretch goal. I'll have unboxed the game. I'll have looked at the components. My kids will have played with some of the miniatures. I'll have gotten a degree of fun and enjoyment out of that. And then I'll turn around and sell it, and it'll be fine. You know the concept of, what's it called? Oh my gosh, I forgot the term. The term for when you buy things. When you buy things, therapy shopping, something like that? Retail therapy. Retail therapy. The term retail therapy, when you go out and you're down and you buy something and you're spending money and it gives you this little buzz of dopamine and the money's gone and the thing doesn't make you happy. If you're treating Kickstarter well, if you're treating Kickstarter right, you can buy the thing, you can do the retail therapy, you can be along for the journey, and then still sell that thing for what you paid for it. Basically giving you all the highs, all the excitement, all the obsession, all the enjoyment of that process, and with none of the loss. It's just a cycle. Potentially a damaging cycle. Dopamine is not great. Then again, every time you open Facebook to check whether there's a hit, you're also getting a dopamine hit. So I guess if there's one takeaway from this video is addictive things are potentially bad, even if they don't seem that damaging. But if you're still on Kickstarter, if you're still on Facebook, drop Facebook and stick with Kickstarter. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. This is a complicated subject, to be very clear. This is a subject where I am talking about addiction, and I'm talking about how unharmful addiction in this case can be, but understand that at the same time, the general concept of addiction and dopamine hits is a conversation that might have some degree of damage attached to it. I'm not an expert in the field. I just know that I've watched things about social media and the potential dopamine hits there and the obsession and the addiction. I'll take Kickstarter any day of the week. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.